Hey guys, Sean Patton back here with Zach Henderson, and we've been putting together a series of videos on kettlebell exercises for the combat athlete, like MMA fighters, jiu-jitsu wrestlers, everybody like that. And those have been going awesome, but what we really want to find out is just a little more from Zach on programming. So, one thing that, like with a lot of combat athletes, jiu-jitsu guys, but especially MMA fighters, is they're trying to train basically 4 different martial arts. They're trying to get their strength conditioning in. They're trying to get their nutrition. They're trying to get their flexibility and mobility. They've got so much to do. How would they best sort of integrate a kettlebell style programming? How many days a week, how much intensity, that sort of stuff. Maybe common errors you see when people train kettlebells.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say a couple of things. Number one is overtraining is real. Absolutely, especially for a lot of the tough characters that we find in combat sports. So when I look at training outside of sport-specific training, we really have to do a very careful risk versus reward analysis. And oftentimes what we see is athletes doing higher risk, lesser reward type training in the gym. Going to failure, lifting super heavy weights maybe too frequently, or maybe not with the technique that we might expect. Right. So specifically with kettlebell and functional strength training, I don't like to think of it as adding stuff on top of more stuff. I like to think, what can we do to integrate and get the most bang for your buck with the fewest number of exercises and being as efficient with our time as possible? Yeah. And what we're thinking about here, again, when we're talking about training, strength and conditioning training in the context of getting better at a sport, we want to think about skill. We're not training necessarily to get, stage ready for a bodybuilding show. Right. You know what I mean? What we're doing is complementing our sport practice. Right? So number one, if you want to get better at your sport, if you want to get better at jiu-jitsu, you better be doing a lot of jiu-jitsu. Okay? Don't think that you can really get, and I'm learning this the hard way, don't think that you can get better at jiu-jitsu without rolling with somebody, right? Or without practicing, right? You can only do so much in the privacy of your own home with YouTube. So, with that being said, a few principles, a few things that I like to keep in mind when it comes to programming. Number one, and in general, when we're talking about just generalities, like to think about a 5-time-a-week training schedule. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we're doing 3 days of jiu-jitsu. That's your bread and butter. Your jiu-jitsu practice is what you're going to want to prioritize. And so then let's say that maybe you have a little bit of extra time and energy to do a lighter training session in addition to one of your jiu-jitsu days, and you have 2 other days that you can dedicate to your strength and conditioning practice. So here's the way that I would kind of break that down. On the day, like let's say that you have a day where you're rolling a little bit light, or you're doing a not kill yourself in jiu-jitsu class, and you have a little bit of time or energy at some other point in your day to practice. Let's just keep it to maybe kettlebells and body weight for right now. On that particular day, that's where I would actually prioritize long intensity, steady state cardio and mobility. So if we're talking about kettlebell, maybe a lighter kettlebell swing up to, let's say, around 200 total repetitions. Okay. So you could do that in sets of 10, sets of 20, keeping the heart rate up, but not gasping for air. You just want to kind of get into almost that light jog or power walking type metabolism or mentality. And then, of course, maybe you get tired of swings, so maybe after the first 100, And again, I'm just thinking of examples that I've had to go through people with. Let's say that 200 swings, that's kind of boring. Okay, do 100. Do 10 by 10, and then do the slowest Turkish get-up of your life. Just one on each side.
Yeah.
And again, what's that going to be doing? That's going to be opening your hips, keeping your hips pliable and strong with the swing. You're also doing a tremendous amount of shoulder stability work and to a large degree mobility work there with the get-up. So keeping it very, very simple on a training session on a day where you're also doing jiu-jitsu. Really only doing like 2 exercises.
Really? Yep.
And for me, that's probably something like a light to moderate swing and a very light, slow Turkish get-up. Okay. Would be something that I would recommend there. Now let's say that you have your 2 other days where you have the time and the energy to go a little bit harder. Again, what I would be thinking here is skill over reps or intensity or anything like that. So really your repetitions and your intensity, which are like the 2 big things that everybody wonders about in the gym, how hard and heavy should I be going? That question should be answered in the context of what you need to work on skill-wise. So, that's where it gets really, really dependent on the individual athlete. But for example, if you know that you need to work on your cardio, that's where we would say something like, let's actually stick to like the 200 swings, but let's maybe do 5 dead stop, 20 light. 5 dead stop, 20 light. You do that for, 8 total rounds, and that gives you about 200 swings. So you can see how we can take the same basic exercises and shift the ingredients around to make a whole new meal, right? And that's why we train different variations of the same basic pattern. So that's one that I really, really like for cardiovascular conditioning. Power swing, power swing, power swing, light for, set of 15 or 20.
I like that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. That's if you need to work specifically on, like, let's say cardiovascular. So then let's say that you're really prioritizing that on day 1. And, the rest of that, session could be just body weight calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups, things that aren't going to destroy your joints. Your joints are going through enough hell on the mat. Yeah. So again, going back to this risk versus reward ratio, we don't want to do anything to overtrain and overstress the joints. Something that I kind of roll my eyes at sometimes is when I see these tough combat athletes and they're working harder and doing like the fancy stuff in the gym. Yeah. And I'm thinking, you're blowing yourself out of the water. You're doing more than what you need to do. Yeah. Training is, the point of training is to fill gaps, not do what you're already naturally, predisposed to do. Right. If you're predisposed to be an animal in the gym, well, be an animal on the mat. Yeah. Use your accessory training to fill gaps, to do the things that you know that you need to work on and the things that are going to build you up. Yeah. We see so many athletes where their training looks like Swiss cheese. They're thick and they're strong in certain places, and then other places there's just big holes. Yeah, there's just big holes. So we can use the kettlebell as a way to fill gaps in our cardiovascular, our strength, and our mobility. So again, let's just say for the sake of argument, we have that one other training day. Let's say that we want to use that to build our strength. Okay? So one of the biggest misconceptions in strength training is that you have to go to failure all the time. Yeah. And that is not the case. Strength may be tested with a max. It may be tested with as many reps as you got, but strength is built in that 70 to 80% effort range, okay? So when it comes to, for my dollar, like the deadlift is a great lift to train. You probably want to use like a barbell because you're probably going to need to be, lifting probably somewhere north of like, 200 pounds, for your average, strong male lifter. But hey, if you have a couple of 100-pound kettlebells, there's your deadlift practice there. So again, the classic 5x5 is a good starting place. 5 sets of 5 repetitions in that 70 to 85% range. For my dollar with jiu-jitsu, I think the deadlift is a great lift to train. I would actually be wary about going too heavy with squats because, as you said, it's our hinge power. It's our hamstring and glute power that's really going to move the needle. Hey, squats train that as well, but again, when we're looking at risk versus reward, you're putting a lot, the squat takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
So we just need to be conservative with where we put our efforts. Mm-hmm. Also, what I really, really love with kettlebells is the overhead press. Mm-hmm. So we talked about bottoms up. Yeah. So something about, let's say pressing doubles for 5, or alternating for 5, or 5 on one side and 5 on the other. Mm-hmm. Taking rest breaks in the neighborhood of 1.5 minutes to upwards of 3 minutes. When we're training strength, we're not training metabolic conditioning.
Right, different things, yeah.
They're different things. So respect the fact that they're different things. So when you're training specifically strength, take your rest breaks seriously. And hey, if you're under a time constraint, like you only got 30, maybe upwards of 45 minutes to train, that just means that you're going to be doing fewer total exercises. Yeah. And that's fine. Because again, we're building your base, we're building your foundation over the course of time. And then, once you do your 5x5, there's no reason that you have to bump up linearly with weight every single time. In fact, I'm a big fan of waiving the load. So for example, 1 week doing 5x5, the next week doing maybe 10 sets of 2, maybe with the same weight, maybe doing slightly less rest. You see how, in general, we're still getting to that 20 to 25 total strength reps. Right. So you can break down those 20 to 25 into lots of different set and rep ranges, but if you're constantly giving your body new set and rep stimulus, but still working in that same weight, that's how you keep yourself fresh and progressing. You do something like that, a 5x5 1 week, a 10x2 the next week, boom, kind of going back and forth. Hang out with that for weeks, maybe even months. And then when you bump up to the next size of kettlebell, it's still going to be a little bit of a rude awakening, but you're not going to stall. You're not going to stall out like that, like so many people do when you try to just go linearly.
5% more every week forever.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it's not realistic, yeah.
Unfortunately, the body doesn't work in that way. So that is one example. That is one example of an athlete who trains jiu-jitsu 3 times a week, who has 2 spare days for training and 1 accessory on a jiu-jitsu day.
I think that's awesome, and I'm learning new things, and then also hearing stuff that's like, yes, that makes sense to the training I've done. I've had that where, gone crazy in the gym, and then it has affected my performance on the mat, because then I get to practice, and you're tired, so you're kind of you're not as crisp, you're not as you're a little sloppier with your drilling, you don't go as many rolls, or you're just kind of not feeling good one day, you get sick, and you're out for a while. And then when I dialed it back and found, like you said, that just focus on the consistency and specific movements, and just trying not to say, hey, every time you work out, you don't have to go 100% to failure. And I tell students that too, like if you're trained, especially if you're trained jiu-jitsu, 3, 4, 5 days a week, like doesn't mean that all 5 days you have to come in and you shouldn't have to drag yourself off the mat after a roll. It's like you can pick lighter days, heavier days, and just take care of yourself. And I think that also stops people from burning out. We'll lose less people with their strength conditioning program with jiu-jitsu, They come in and they're like, I'm going to be in here 6 days a week. Like I'm always, every time a new student says that, I'm like, let's just start with maybe 2 or 3, like relax a little bit. It'll be okay, because I've seen so much if they do that and they come, and they do it, and all of a sudden, it's like a person never lifted weights before, and all of a sudden they want to be in the gym for 2 hours, 5 times a week. That's never going to last. They're never going to make it. So yeah, I think finding that balance is really important. And I've noticed a huge difference in my strength and conditioning since I've done that. So yeah, I would say those are all great lessons. One thing I do, what do you think about this? I like jumping rope, so I'll do like 10 minutes a straight jump rope, and then right into the kettlebells around the work, and that kind of gets my heart rate up. Is that something you'd recommend?
Yeah.
Jump rope, stuff like that.
Going for a walk, going for a jog, jump rope, jumping jacks. Yeah, it's all great. And hey, the whole bouncing thing, like they say, that's really good for your lymphatic system.
Yeah.
Right, clearing out the lymph nodes. And yeah, you're getting a little bit of coordination in there. So yeah, jumping rope is great.
Yeah, that's. I noticed when I got ready for Masters Worlds, I did like a camp 2 to 3 months before that, and I was jumping rope for 10 minutes at least 3 times a week, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. And when I got into the Masters World Championship for Jiu-Jitsu, I had a 42-man bracket, 5 matches in like an hour and a half, and I could tell by those matches 3, 4, 5, the guys I was going against, like I had a little more, I had a little more to give, and I think a lot of things go into that, but I noticed a difference when I integrated, like you said, something to get that heart rate up and then lift, as opposed to just going cold into swings. I think I got more out of the lift, and I noticed a good relevance or sort of benefit when I got on the mat. So,
yeah, carryover.
Yeah, it did carry. I think it's really important. So thanks so much, Zach. And of course, like I said, Zach's here in Nashville, but he's available online as well. So find him, Zach Henderson _ on Instagram. He's on Facebook. And, he does online programming. He can do in-person stuff, answer questions. So again, make that connection and follow him. And, if you need programming, he's the guy to go to, and he'll take care of you. So Zach, thanks so much for all your time.
Sean,
really
thank you.
it.
Appreciate you.